Marnie Dresser joins us on WRCO. Impelled, a new play by Marnie Dresser, premieres on stage in Spring Green this weekend at the Gard Theater. And good to have you in the studio, Marnie. I'm curious when you find the time to put all these things together like this.
Well, that's a really good question. I have always written. I started writing poetry when I was 8 years old, and I first wrote it to get out of trouble because my teacher, I was apparently being kind of squirrely, and so I put together a book of poems that I just stole from Beatles lyrics and like greeting cards and stuff because I thought maybe that would get me out of trouble, and I don't think it did. But then later that year, I wrote an actual poem about inflation. So I've just been doing it, my whole more than 50 years now. And even all those years working at the Richland campus, I always made time to write. And I got published here and there over the years. But the thing that was hardest for me was the follow-through, work with other people, collaborate, let's get this thing on stage, let's get this thing published. But I was always writing because that just feels... I think that's when I feel most alive. It's when I feel like I know why I'm on the planet. So I've always done that. So now that I'm retired, I have time to pursue some of the other parts of it. So that's been one of the huge blessings of retirement, just a little bit more time, not just to do the writing, but to follow through. Follow through is always my hardest thing.
So some of the work in Impelled, is it like some older stuff that you've put together, kind of a compilation of some of your work?
It is. Compilation's kind of the right word, kind of not. So what I've been trying to do for a really long time is publish a collection of poetry. And that's about 45 to 60 pages of poems. And so, let's see, it's been 6 or 7 years ago now. I thought, well, no, wouldn't it be interesting? Because I also write plays. And I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if I could take some of these narrative poems that I have, because I think in characters even when I'm not writing plays, and what if I took 3 of these characters and put them together on a college campus? How would they interact? And it really was a nice combination. Like they had lots of good chemistry as characters. So I just put it together and started sending it off to various book editors, book contests, and got some good feedback. And then I talked to some people about, well, would this work on stage? And again, got some good feedback. Another playwriting contest, Forward Theater in Madison has a Wisconsin Writes competition. Got some good feedback from them, but it's as if it wasn't quite working on either end, and I wanted it to work as both. So I would like this to be a play that works on stage, and then when or if it gets published, people could sit down and read it as a book of poems. So, it was challenging. It wasn't quite working. It was in my head. And River Valley Arts is an amazing organization. If you are in the River Valley School District, you're eligible for grants from River Valley Arts, and they have a great website. You can find out there are major grants, smaller grants. So I got what's called an artistic development grant. And so that was money that allowed me to pay a poetry editor to give me really specific feedback. And it has allowed me to hire 3 actors and a director and rent the Gard Theater so that we, last fall, the actors and the director, we sat down around my dining room table and they did a reading and were able to tell me, and I could hear it more when they read it. Okay, here's where it's working. Here's where it's not working. And I will say at that point, I had kind of a crisis of confidence. We just had the Minecraft movie came out.
Yes.
My son has been interested in Minecraft, for years and years. When he first started playing, he dug a hole so deep in Minecraft he couldn't get out of it. And apparently that's a thing that happens really early on. And so I felt as though I had come up with this really clever idea for poems that work as a play, and that I wasn't capable of following through. But I worked through that and revised it, and then we had another reading in January, again around my dining room table, the three actors, Melinda Van Slyke and Douglas Swenson and Hannah Jo Anderson, and then my director, Terry Kerr, and they just sort of spontaneously burst into applause when we finished, because we all could just feel it. Oh, okay, it works now. It actually works. So then it's just a couple more rounds of revisions, just clearing up. I set the play in Southern Illinois because that's where I'm from, and it's kind of like a Gothic part of my imagination. Most of my fiction and my plays are, hovering around Southern Illinois, and there were some Southern Illinois jokes in there that just didn't work. So just cleaning up stuff like that. And then we're going to rehearse a couple times this week, and then see how many people we can get in the audience to have a go at it on Sunday publicly.
So the plot is kind of like what you're thinking, right? It's like your inner thoughts. And
some of it, yeah. On one level, one of my actor, Douglas Swenson, was saying it's sort of like a carrot. On the top, you see the green leafy thing, and then the carrot is actually what's beneath. So on the surface, these are three characters, Lynette and Martin and Carrie, on a college campus. And the student has several problems. The administrator, Lynette, is trying to help her solve the problems. The professor, Martin, is kind of being helpful, kind of not being helpful. So on one level, it's just a workplace drama set on a college campus. And you just see them work through their problems, and Lynette and Martin are sort of clashing at the beginning, but they seem to be developing a friendship. So that's happening. And then one of the things that intrigues me about the human brain, and this is true of my brain, and it's not just my brain, that even when I'm in a conversation with someone that I'm interested in and I want to be there, there are about 10 to 15 other things going on in my head at the same time. Some of them are boring. Some of them is just my to-do list. Some of it is, scandalous stuff. Some of it is questions, asking God, why are things the way they are? And so in the play, there are things that are happening on the surface, and then in between, when the characters are interacting, each of them takes time to express their inner monologues. And sometimes right in the middle of when they're interacting, they interrupt it to go have an interior monologue. So I think for people who have that experience, I'm just trying to embody that in the play. Any
experience, true life, that happened at the UW Richland when you were there as a faculty member?
I will say it is not exactly autobiographical, but it was very much informed by being on a college campus. When I first started there in 1992, I think there were something like 6 faculty members who were married to their spouses had originally been their students. And that was nothing scandalous at the time and nothing inappropriate, and those were long marriages. Clearly, those worked fine. But that's an interesting thing in higher education. Is it okay for a professor to date a student? It's gotten less and less okay since 1992. Those particular people with those relationships, obviously, those were fine. So one of the characters is a student who's actually been having an affair with a married professor, which is a different thing entirely. That's one of her problems because it's been found out, and the professor has said, you have to drop my class. It's past the drop deadline, so she's not sure what she's going to do. Her other problem is that she's been allowed as a student to just continue to take classes, and she's racked up 130 credits, but she doesn't have a degree yet. And so that would never have happened on the Richland campus. John Poole would have never let that happen, right? One of the wonderful things we did on the campus was we had faculty advisors. I would never have let a student take that many credits without getting a degree. It just wouldn't have happened. But it does happen in higher education. So this is just a student who's just kind of been bopping around. And so then we have an administrator who's trying to come in and set things right. And then the professor who really just kind of wants to go off and get ready for his classes and not be bothered with anything else. And that, that feels familiar too. So
it seems to me there have been movies made that have that kind of that topic of your inner what you're actually thinking out loud.
Right, and so what was it?
It was a cartoon.
There are cartoons, and then wasn't there a...
Jim Carrey had a movie.
Jim Carrey has one, and then...
Mel Gibson, too. I think
that was what I was going to say, Mel Gibson, and he gets in trouble,
yes.
Right? So in my play, people voice their interior monologues, but nobody else can hear it, except for the audience. The audience can hear it. So it's out loud so you can figure out what they're saying, but it's not something the other characters hear.
Is friendship one of the overriding themes, Marnie?
Well, it really is. I think, when you're a kid, friendship seems to come kind of naturally, right? Because you have classmates. If you go to church, you have people in your church, people in your neighborhood. But at least my experience was, as I've gotten older, friendships are harder to maintain, either because people move or we're all just too busy, or, you change, your friends change, maybe the friendship doesn't feel right anymore, and then how do you make new friends? Sometimes it just feels more impossible than it ever used to. So Lynette and Martin, this administrator and this professor, they haven't met before this particular day, and they clash at the very beginning, but then as the day goes on, they get to know each other a little bit better, and they've got some friendship chemistry. So they're actually developing a friendship. And that was one of the most things I really tried to focus on in the last revision that I did, was just emphasizing that friendship as we end the play, that part of the resolution of the play is that these two seem to be really becoming friends.
A new play by Marnie Dresser. We're talking about Impelled. It premieres on stage in Spring Green Sunday. And I understand there are some adult themes, maybe a little bit of spicy language.
There are, right. I've been putting a warning on the poster, and I put a warning in the news release because, our interior thoughts can go anywhere, or I guess some people try to control their interior thoughts too, but for a lot of us, our interior thoughts just go everywhere. So one of them in particular, Martin has some scandalous thoughts that he's thinking, that he's expressing. It's probably R-rated. It's nothing so over the top, but I wanted to make sure people understood, if people are my friends from my teaching, or if they follow me on Instagram, I just post things like that I'm Christmas ornaments that I'm sewing for my family or something. So I wanted to make sure people understood there's a different side to me, just to make sure nobody showed up and was absolutely thrown. And then there is a fair bit of profanity. I was thinking about this just the other day. I grew up pretty Baptist, in a very Baptist family, well, some Methodists too, but my grandmommy wouldn't even let us say heck or darn, because those were just substitutes for swear words.
Sure.
And so I certainly wouldn't do it on the air, but I do use profanity in my personal life, and I think that's part of why, is that it just was taboo, so it just seems like the most amazing thing in the world to do. And so the characters have some profanity too. So I just wanted to make sure people weren't startled when they came in. So.
A number of jokes, though. I mean, it's pretty funny, right?
It is funny, and that is one of the things I am curious about, is if people laugh where I think they're gonna laugh. But these are three characters. When they're interacting with each other, they're making jokes. When they are in their own thoughts, they're making jokes. So, yeah, that was one of the things the actors talked to me about, that they really appreciated the humor in it, and and we're all curious where the laughs are going to come. So,
yeah, you find that out sometimes in a play, where a place that you didn't even think of draws a laugh, and you're like, "Oh, I didn't get that." But,
right. So that'll be interesting. And each of these characters too is wrestling in different ways with religious belief and spiritual practice, and so those things come up as well. So there's a lot of different stuff going on.
Question and answer session, right?
Yeah. So it's a staged reading, not don't think there are going to be any props. There's going to be a little bit of movement because we want to figure out how to indicate this is when the characters are interacting versus this is when they're in their interior monologue. So we're looking at what can we do with the lighting in a really minimal way, what can we do with movement in a really minimal way. But it is just the actors up there reading the script, and there will be somebody reading the stage directions. So it is that kind of situation, and then. You have a very brief pause, so if people need to leave, they can go ahead and leave. And then whoever sticks around, there's a question and answer time. And that's really valuable for me as a playwright, just to hear from the audience what's working, what's not working, did they get lost, where did they get lost, just all those sorts of things. So it's really, really helpful.
You're not the director. Terry Kerr is.
Terry Kerr is the director.
How does that work? I mean, you just kind of turn it over to Terry then?
Well, she's brilliant. I've had staged readings of plays several times, I think 4 different times. But she's the person who directed a time when I had plays that actually had a performance. So she used to work with the Taliesin School of Architecture. And part of Taliesin's philosophy is that education for an architect can't just be house plans and blueprints, that they needed to learn about the arts and they needed to learn about different things. So Terry taught theater to the architecture students, and she developed a thing. I don't know if she's the only person who's done this, but they would do storytelling to each other, and each student would pick a story that they wanted to do on stage, and then they would write it as a script, and the students would perform each other's stories on stage. It was nonfiction, but it's been made theatrical. So we did that, and it was called Perspectives. And then I wrote a play about a couple of sisters in a bar. And so we would do a scene from my play and then one of the student stories, and then a scene from my play and one of the student stories. And so working with Terry in that, I just got to see there are things that a director thinks of, and particularly somebody like Terry, that I just would never, I don't have that in my wheelhouse. I don't have that list of things you need to think about and ask about and talk about. So that's been fun, working with her again and hearing her thoughts and hearing her perspective.
Hope a lot of people will come out 2 to 4 on Sunday at the Gard Theater. Great place to see that and see the show, right?
It is, yeah. Robert Gard is someone who believed in arts in rural spaces, and that's who that theater's named after. So I'm very happy to be doing it there. And we'll have a jar at the front for a Goodwill offering, but otherwise the tickets are free, so just come on out.
Don't have to go to Eventbrite or any place online?
Nope, just show up and make a donation if you want to, but you really don't have to. Nobody's going to be standing there watching, and that's just to help defray some of the costs, because of course whatever I got from the grant, we totally overspent it.
So then what is next there for the play? Where do you take it next? Do you use some feedback maybe to figure out where you're going with it?
Right, that's my question. That's one of the things that I wanted the grant to do. As I mentioned, I've had a couple of performances of a play, but mostly I've had staged readings. So one of my questions is, all right, what does come next? We'll get the feedback. I can certainly revise it again wherever people feel like I need to. And then what happens? So I'm hoping, in that audience, there'll be enough people who can help me figure out, all right, what does come next? And then I can work with Terry and my actors and other theater people to say, okay, when is this ready for an actual performance?
Wonderful. Well, Good luck. Anything else you want to add, Marnie?
I don't think so. I always appreciate the chance to come on WRCO, and I would love to see a lot of my Richland Center peeps come over to Spring Green for the afternoon and check out what we're up to.
Always good to see you.
Thanks.
Yeah, you bet. Marnie Dresser joining us again. Impelled, a new play coming up, premiering on stage in Spring Green Sunday at the Gard Theater between 2 and 4 with a stage reading and a talkback. This is The Morning Show.